Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Sorry, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Wasn't sure if I had my mic on or not.
Good afternoon, Joe.
Hey, how are you?
I am well. How about yourself?
Doing good. I'm actually driving, so I'm not sharing video or worrying about looking at you yet. But we went and grabbed lunch and pulling back into a shared workspace where we're at today.
Okay.
And then we'll be set up to watch everything in a few minutes. So.
Great.
Yeah, but how's your day?
Busy, but in a good way. I'm one of those people having an extremely slow day, which rarely happens, feels a little bit like death by paper cuts, you know?
Yeah. Well, I have a question for you because we have the Smart Search
Yes.
division is piloting out an SAP model that we would like to consider using as our as our Six Sigma project. If it's obviously self-serving, but something that we're spending a lot of time, effort, energy on already. Sure. And we'd love to share with you, because we're using all of the same principles that you're teaching us. Mm-hmm. And putting it together for the SAP model. And we're modeling it also after, the SAP model for smart solutions.
Right. Okay. Well, I keep my Outlook calendar up to date, barring last minute calls saying, hey, can we meet, something like that, which happens to us all, of course. Sure. So feel free to throw an invitation out at me, and again, you should be able to. I think I have my settings so that everyone has access to see my calendar. But yeah, throw something at me and we can book some time to go over the details. And today, as we're wrapping up this session, and this will be a relatively quick session, then we can talk about next steps and where to start.
That'd be great.
Awesome. Well, I know Chris will not be joining us today, so I will just go ahead and jump in, because again, this is the good, bad, and ugly of Lean Six Sigma, right? And again, I know I sound like a broken record, and I do repeat myself on a regular basis, but again, there's a method to that madness. So one thing I really want to emphasize is this last session is for the purposes of your project, really understand who your customer is, and understand, quite frankly, most projects have multiple customers. And you need to get there. Again, we talked about voice of the customer. Again, these are basic business principles. Make sure you get that detail from them, touch base with them, including, for instance, Joe, part of that would be touching base with someone you're onboarding at some point and saying, hey, would you mind taking this answering a few questions just to help us make this better? We're working on this project. And just, let people know in cases such as that, or if it ends up being something that affects any employees that whether they be direct hire employees that we hire or whatever that may be, or internal staff, of course, vendors, whomever that may be, get their input. And it's my experience that you may get the confused puppy look, right? They're like, really, you want my input? But you explain it and get in there and do that. And then again, really define who your customer is. Now, speaking by the numbers, so to speak, it's important to make sure you've got numbers to compare, because again, when you're working a project, you start with a current state. This is where I started, and then ideally you're improving things, so things are going up, but then you need to be able to measure that end state as well. So knowing what you're measuring and having that available, obviously you need to be able to do that. And then, of course, it's important to understand, what are you measuring? Does it really have meaning? Again, I've said this multiple times in the past. When someone says, gosh, we have, X number of clients or new clients, or, we've onboarded this many employees, that's great, but that's a piece of a story, right? If you tell me, I've onboarded 100 employees. I brought in 100 employees in this last time period, whatever that is, and our success rate, and again, you define what success means for you in your process. Success can mean 100% retention rate. It could be 80%, 90% retention rate. It could be onboarded successfully, complete, for folks that are not, direct hire, but it could be, complete retention and no accidents during that period. So again, you're defining what success is, and don't keep the bar really low. So I can say, I've got 100% success rate. Be realistic and challenge yourself when you set that. So again, fill out the whole picture, because those numbers really can tell a story. And I've mentioned it before, but I equate the easy graphs and things and charts a lot like USA Today, which of course, and I'm not trying to disparage them, but they do the bright colors on their, and I'm not even sure if USA Today is even around anymore, but in any case, I just remember when I used to travel a lot for work, and of course every hotel's got a USA Today sitting there. They're all their different business papers, and that's always one. And of course, that's the one that jumps out at you because it's got the colors and the charts and the ooh ah. Well, that's great, but I'll be honest, I'm sure I certainly can, and I'm sure any of us could. When push comes to shove, you can produce a chart, a graph, or whatever to prove a point. If it's just this one thing, I could say, 100% of Americans think milk is good, or whatever, or 80% of Americans think milk is bad, whatever. Again, we can come up with all kinds of things, but when you flesh things out and you're not just measuring one thing, but multiple things, and that's where it really tells a story. Again, reminding that you don't necessarily have to measure your Sigma level for your process before and after. But if you do, just reminding you again that the Sigma level is 3.4 defects per million opportunities. And again, I'd like y'all to think about that. If you did something a million times, if you only had a problem with it 3.4 times out of a million, gosh, that's pretty darn good. I mean, it really is. And again, like I just mentioned, make that data meaningful, because there are mileage always varies by user, but again, whether you're walking through, and this goes for an example, would be walking into a client's office. If you walk into a client's office and say, we can do A and B, well, that's nice, but if you give them a laundry list of things you can do and how you do them, why you do them, and how you've been successful, in other words, data, all that data that's fleshed out, not using just high level terms, but really flesh it out and give that, boy, that's so much more of a solid argument, so to speak, than being able to just walk through a door and say, I can make things better for you. Well, great. How are you going to do that? And again, I know I'm preaching the choir here, and I'm probably repeating a lot of what Carrie said, but probably to y'all many, many times.
It meshes really good together.
Well, and that's really what it's about. And again, none of this is rocket science, or certainly exclusive to this. And then certainly when you're making your data meaningful, you're defining what you're doing. Again, reminding y'all that the basic core of this is DMAIC: define, measure, analyze, improve, control. So after you define that, make sure, again, you're measuring things correctly. And again, that success thing, you determine what success means for you in your project. Certainly be realistic, but also recommend be a little aggressive with those goals as well. Shoot for the moon if possible. And again, when I did my initial Six Sigma training back in those iOmega days, all of those execs that at iOmega at the time were all former GE people and GE execs, which means every single one of them was a black belt, at least a black belt certified. And the president of the company, when he flew in, I still remember to this day, and this was the year 2000, so this has been 20 years ago. I still very vividly remember his speech, because he talked about, throughout business, I hear over and over, let's just grab that low-hanging fruit. And he's like, which is nice, and that's a little cute, but why grab low-hanging fruit when you can yank up the tree and shake the whole tree? Get out there, and again, obviously, again, preaching to the choir, aggressive sales folks, that's what they do. They don't say, well, I'm just going to pick off a couple easy ones. You go out there and you try and get your great white whale, so to speak, right? Everybody wants that. Again, part of that process, just recapping, is the analyze that data. Certainly get a lot of data together, but then really be willing to pick it apart, the good, bad, and ugly of it, and decide what is useful. Is what we're doing useful? If the project you're working on is something where you're building something new, like for you, Joe, you're building a model after something, but something new for you, pick it apart. FMEA is a great tool for something like that, where you're going, this looks really great, but let's throw it in an FMEA, the process in an FMEA, and look, where are the potential failures? Are we thinking of all the potential places something could go wrong with us? And really, again, FMEA is a great analytical tool for that. And like I mentioned before, it's one I use pretty regularly. Then, of course, improving, of course, we always want that arrow to go up when we're making those improvements. Make your improvements once you've done your analysis and all of those things. And again, every step of the way, at some point, you want to check in, make sure you're in touch and you're on track with the voice of that customer, your stakeholders. Make sure that you're really following that, and you don't, again, remember talking about scope creep. You don't go out of scope. You don't one more thing yourself, which I've definitely been guilty, if 3 things are good, why not do 4, kind of a thing, which is easy to do. And if it's relatively easy to do and still easy to measure, yeah, you can go ahead and add it in, and which is never to say, once you set it, it's set in stone. Certainly there's flexibility. Just be careful with that. Make sure it's something measurable and it's still on track with meeting the needs of the customer. This is the part where I get to talk about my favorite piece of that whole DMAIC thing, the define, measure, analyze, improve, control. And control is something that I harp on regularly, because if you don't have controls in place, whether it be an audit, whether it be billing, an SOP, and holding people accountable, there's a loaded word, right? Then things can fizzle out. You can go through all this great exercise of doing all these things and things fall apart. Of course, part of control is, even if things are continuing on, you do need to check in and review on occasion, because things change, right? The business needs change, your customer needs change, your customer base for that particular area may change. So check in, and again, you determine what makes sense on the level of checking in. It may be monthly, it may be yearly. It depends on what works for you, and you'll define that at the beginning. That's part of those definitions you'll do at the beginning, is you'll define that there. And again, that define, measure, analyze, improve, control, I will talk about this to death. That sustainability piece is so darn important. Make sure you do set a review schedule and set expectations of when you are going to be reviewing that process again. I worked with a gal who, when she finished her certification, she was the owner of her own process, so it wasn't something she was going to be handing the project off when she was finished. But she certified, walked out, certified her green belt, was super excited, done all the steps, filled everything in. And first thing out of her mouth is, I am so glad I'm done with this. I'm like, it's continuous improvement. You're always, even if it's just a quick, brief check-in, you can create some sort of, whether it be just a once-a-year audit or something, to be able to make sure you're just on track. And again, I throw this in here because sustainability has a lot of factors that increase your chances of building sustainability into a process. Certainly social is part of it, which is, do people understand what they're doing? Do they understand why it is, why the things behind? It's very easy. I kind of equate that to a job where, and there have been times where I've had jobs where it's just been crazy busy. You know, you dream about your work. You wake up in the morning, you're, you know, brushing your teeth, thinking already with your laundry list going over everything you're going. And I had joked in the past, you know, maybe one day I'll just go see if Walmart or Smith's has a job, and I can just clock in, go be a checker, punch some numbers here on the register, scan a few things, and then, you know, check out or whatever, which of course would end up driving me crazy. Although there's some folks, and bless them, I'm glad we've got them, that absolutely love doing those kinds of jobs, and we need folks like that, obviously. But folks like that also, even folk, regardless of the level where we've got the boots on the ground kind of folks, to the absolute upper echelons of management, and then of course all of us in between, having them understand that social piece of it, having them be invested in the changes that you're making, in the improvements that you're making, in the new process you may be creating, any of those things, that's really important to make sure that you're doing those things, so that, again, it's that culture, right? It's the company culture, which again, over to environmental, and environmental is not the bunnies and the trees, but again, it's the business environment that you're in. Does the business environment, will it sustain the changes and the things you want to do, and the improvements you want to do, the new processes you want to do? Also, as well, part of the environmental is, once you've completed a process, you got to be like Oprah and share that information with everybody. I mean, share with everybody, because just as something may work really well for you, Joe, for instance, it may translate over to one of the other divisions. Now, it may not be the exact same process, but they can take the key elements or the idea, the spark, the seeds of those changes, and implement them elsewhere. So it's always a great part of, and that's a great piece of the control piece as well, as sustainability, to just say, okay, I've wrapped this up, I'm done. Can we apply this anywhere else? And the answer may be yes, the answer may be no, not really. Well, and that's fine, but it's there in our library, so to speak, of things, projects that we've worked on. It's always there as a resource to use for future use. Even if it's something we know we can use, but geez, we just don't have the bandwidth to take care of it right away. We can do it later. And then of course, economic, I want to make these great changes. Again, do the economics of the business support that? Ideally, if we're improving things, reducing costs, increasing efficiency, ideally the answer to that should be a resounding yes. I put this slide in every time I teach this class, because I tell a story from this. And this picture is not my own. This is a picture I just did, quite frankly, a Google search for. Many of you know, I served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Senegal in West Africa a very long time ago. And at the time I was a project manager, although that was definitely not my title. And I didn't really realize it at the time, but that's what I was doing. Because as a relative of mine liked to point out, I was not going to West Africa to teach farmers how to farm. And they already had that down pretty solidly. I was there for organization. And one time I walked into went into a village to see if I could work there, if there was an opportunity for me to work with the people there. And there was, and I found out a non-governmental organization, a big NGO, had been in there years before, 5, 6, 7 years, I don't remember the exact number of years, but several years before, had been in there before. And they're like, we're doing pump projects and throughout West Africa, not just in that country, but throughout West Africa. And they walked in and they basically said, we know what you need. Y'all are having to pull well, old-fashioned way, bucket down into the water kind of thing, and that's really hard and backbreaking. And gosh, we can save you so much time and it just so much benefit you all so much more if we provide you pumps. We'll pay for the pumps. We'll put pumps in. Everybody's excited. You need pumps, right? Yes, sure. We need pumps. Great. It was a party, and I was told about this after the fact. Of course, they came in, it was like a full day's worth of parties. They brought soccer balls for the kids. It was, prizes for the kids, some cookware and things like that for the ladies, and, some other things for the gentlemen, I'm sure. And then they installed the pumps, blah, blah, blah. Here's how you work it. Great. Everyone's happy. They go off. And then here comes Shauna, a few years later, 5, 6, 7 years later, and I walk in, the pump had broken in that particular village. Best of intentions with that agency coming in and putting in pumps. They never told anybody how to fix them. They never gave anyone the skills to fix something that broke. And quite frankly, even if they had, they put in such a high-level, high-tech version of a pump that even if they had showed someone how to fix it, they wouldn't have had the resources to fix them. So those pumps were still there. When that particular village, when I walked in, the well had been opened back up. Ladies were there, and the ladies were pulling water from the well, and the pump was still there, and it was still in use. But you know how it was being used? They were doing laundry, and they were hanging their laundry on the pump. I'll be honest. Everything happens for a reason, and I have been talking about that story for, obviously since I served in Peace Corps in 91 to 94. So that was a long time ago. And I'm still talking about that example today. And actually, when I was back in Senegal working on the Lean Six Sigma and business training that I was doing there for a couple of weeks, I talked about it then as well. And classic example of someone coming in and saying, didn't really truly check in. What do you need? What can we do? Where could things fail? Didn't check all of those things, do those basic principles. And this stuff is not new. I mean, even in the 90s, this stuff was around. They didn't check, came in, everything was a party. They walked off, and they left feeling great, probably high-fiving, right? And feeling good, going home, being able to tell stories, do their slideshows, not realizing that there were problems 7 years later along the same line.
Yeah, you can't leave us hanging. What did you do? Did you help them fix it?
No, because again, as a Peace Corps volunteer, we do not come in with funds. We can write grants for funding for specific things, but there's no way to do sustainability for something that, because I'll be honest, the picture, I just Google image this picture. This pump is a pretty basic pump that got installed. Rather than that, what we did actually, because I was an agriculture volunteer, so I was helping people do gardens and environmental education, things like that. What we did was we talked about, well, this doesn't work. We can attempt to fix this and get it fixed. And I had 5 gentlemen all at once say, oh, it's more hassle than it's work. I've got to listen to my wife come home and tell me one more thing about this thing not working or whatever, and it's too much of a headache. I said, so then I asked that question. This is one of the places where I learned to ask, well, if you can have anything, what would you like to do? They go, well, we love having this pump that was great for a while it lasted, but again, it's not sustainable. What we'd really like is to be able to have access to running water so we can just turn on a faucet. There happened to already have been a very large project that was sustainable. It was being maintained, big system of that it was actually the Saudi government had done like many years before, of these big deep bore wells, because this area, the wells were very deep. They were 30 meters, about 100 feet deep. So, and I'll be honest, I tried pulling water one time, and this is just fresh out of college, Shauna trying to pull water one day, and after pulling up 2 or 3 bags full of water, I had to go take a nap. It's really hard work. But they decided they wanted running water, and I said, well, that's expensive. Let's find out how much it costs. We priced it out. It was too expensive for 1 or 2 families to do, but they decided that if everybody in the entire town got together, codicized their money, they could afford it. And we worked out a payment plan so they could afford to get it installed, and a line was run in. And so it wasn't that every single household had its own running water, but they had a central tap. Well, it was like a central kind of pillar thing that had taps on all 4 sides, and they had running water. So the ladies still had to go walk to go get their water to the town square, but instead of pulling water from a well or sitting there and doing the hand pump thing and all of that, they just turned on the knob and they got their water. And it was something, it took them about 3 years to pay for completely, but it was something they did. And they didn't have to worry about maintaining it, because part of the price of admission, so to speak, for that particular thing was all the maintenance and all the upkeep was taken care of by the bigger company. So that's how that was resolved ultimately. All right, so let me talk briefly, if I can, about savings. Most projects, there are 3 different types of savings that you can generate. And not every project has all kinds. Some will have 2 or more. Some may only have just 1. Again, mileage varies by user. First is, of course, hard savings, where we no longer have to do this step, and this cost us X number of dollars, X number of time, and of course time is money, so we factor that in as well. We no longer have to do this. Is that hard savings, right? We no longer need to buy something as well, right? And then of course soft savings. Again, these are general business principles. This is not anything exclusive. So again, you're increasing throughput, things like that, increasing and thereby increasing revenue, savings like that. And again, things like saving time again. And also even things like you've done something that's increased employee morale. People don't necessarily think about that as a savings. But I got news for you. Happy employees work a little bit harder than unhappy employees. They really do. And then the last one is that top line value, where you've created a project that actually generates income. Really 10% or fewer projects actually generate income, but boy, if you get one, my hat's off to you. That's great to be able to have one. And again, some have a little bit of everything, and I'm happy to work with anyone when they work their project to really get in there and make sure we're squeezing out every penny out of a project of savings that we are, and to make sure that it's legitimate savings. When you start your project, the first thing you'll start with is the A3. And A3 is a tool, and again, for certification, whether it be yellow belt or green belt, you need to do something, at least 1 for yellow belt and 3 for green belt, of course. For that define part of that DMAIC, A3 is a define tool, a tool for definition. So, and I require an A3 for every project. So your yellow belt, your tools already is kind of assigned to you. And A3 is just a dashboard. And the Excel spreadsheet that I sent out before, and I'll send send it out when I do a recap email here after we're done today. There is a template for an A3 on there. Pull it up, make it your own, change what you feel like you need to change. But everything in there is just different questions. What is your business case? Again, business case, what problem are you trying to solve? Who are my team members? Who do I need to talk to? It asks those basic things. Then ask what kind of tools should I be using, or what tools should I be using? Fill it, and my recommendation is when you start out, fill it out as best as you can. Again, it's an Excel spreadsheet, so it's as flexible as any Excel spreadsheet. You can change whatever you need to change. And of course, always go back in and update as you have more information. Once you have that A3, then of course you can jump into your project charter, because you start filling in those high level parts of your A3, really that's just transferring over to your project charter. You may fluff it up a little bit more, because again, an A3 is really your dashboard to do the nitty gritty of everything. Whereas the project charter is a little more high level, just sort of the pretty shiny stuff, so to speak, to be able to present to the, like, your stakeholders. Most of them don't really want to necessarily, oh, I used XY tool and this is what I did. This didn't work the first time, so then I went back and all this. They usually don't want, and then, you know, some may say, well, yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing the A3, and that's fine. You can show them that as well. And then again, next step are just that. Start your project. Identify what you want to do, and get started by filling out that A3, and start using the tools as appropriate. And again, I know it's difficult to know sometimes. I don't know what tool to use. That's why you get me for 6 months for the course of using the project, so I can help you in that. Also, that Excel spreadsheet, there is a tool summary page, tab on there that gives you examples of tools for define, tools for measure, analyze, improve, control, examples of each. And in many cases, some tools can be used more than once. And if you use them, the same tool different times, but for different purposes, like I want to do a process map, is my beginning as I'm measuring things, but then I'm going to do another process map as part of my control piece too. That same tool template, but using different things is counted as different tools. So again, pretty basic stuff, right? And again, ask questions, just check in with me as needed. I don't chase anyone down for certification or check in, hey, how's your project going? My assumption is if you need me, you'll let me know. I'm always available, of course. Phone, text, in person when we're allowed to do it again. And then of course, Zoom, email, whatever you need. So I'm always available.
Cool.
All right, and so let's see if I can get this to change. So yellow belt, again, just recapping, yellow belt again is one tool is required to certify, one tool per each of the DMAIC steps, and $10,000 in savings. And I'll be honest, for most of the projects you all are doing, if you all certify at your level, they're probably all going to be green belt projects. And then at the end, that last piece is you complete a readout. And what a readout is it's just a short presentation explaining to your stakeholders, and I'm present at that point as well. Of course, you've done your due diligence. You feel, okay, I'm done. I made my improvements. Here's my measurements. I've done all of that. Great. Basically, it's your opportunity to do your silver platter, whether it be in person or virtual, just to say, this is what I've done. This is the business case. Again, that project charter level stuff. This is how I've done. This is the improvements I've made. Here are the results I produced. This is the amount of savings, income I've generated, whatever the case may be. Then we give them an opportunity to ask any questions, ask for any clarifications if they have any. And if there's no clarifications needed, or if there are, you can take care of that. Once that's taken care of, then we certify you out. Easy stuff, right? And
sounds easy.
and green belt is similar, of course, although of course the requirements are a little different. The same readout.
30,000 savings. So
yeah.
Bigger impact projects.
Larger project, bigger impact project. And again, I'll be honest, every organization has different expectations for their projects and certification. I set these, and I set these based on, I wanted them to be aggressive but very realistic. $10,000 is, you've got to move the needle, of course, but it's done for the size that SMART is, right? Again, gauging for SMART. I'll give an example of, again, back in the time when I was working with JCPenney and Shared Service Center. This is a multi-billion-dollar company, and they set their green belt level, and actually I lobbied really hard to get it raised, but they basically said no, we didn't want to demoralize people. Or some people think, well, Bob only had to do this level, now you're raising it to this level, and deal with that. But their green belt level was $30,000 savings, which I thought was quite low for that size of an organization, because those projects just inherently are larger. Again, my initial certification, when I initially certified as green belt, I saved $3 million. Still just got a green belt, but the more you deal with and the different belt levels, again, the projects just get more complex. All right. Deadline to certify is 6 months from today, and which 6 months from today, we'll call that Monday, November 1st is the deadline for close of business. And I'm flexible on that, but you got to convince me why it needs to be more than 6 months. If it's just 6 months because I got busy and I didn't get it done, that's a little bit more of a conversation than, well, what I'm measuring, I really need 6-7 months just to measure it, or to go through the, I want to go through 2 or 3 quarters business cycle to something like that. That makes sense. That being said, I've been extremely flexible, because really the ultimate goal is not to, is to have people certify so they're using those tools and understand how to use the tools. All right, do you have any questions? Deep thoughts?
You'll send us the.
I'll send you all this slide deck. I've saved it all as a PDF. I'll send information on, I'll send out the template set. Again, it's just an Excel spreadsheet. And again, feel free to kick the tires, bump it around, make any updates you want. I'm very much a proponent of use the tools that work for you. So yeah, use the tools that work for you. Use and organize however you like. And again, touch base with me if you have any questions on just defining your project. Make sure I would recommend to make sure you define not only what your project is, but define who your champion is as well. Because, and again, that champion is that person who's going to help you open doors and break down barriers, so to speak, to be able to accomplish what you need to accomplish. And I think for most of you folks, you can pretty much get that done on your own, but I would still define a champion, because if nothing else, they're an extra ear and a set of eyes to look at something as well. And then of course, check in with me as you have questions or need any information. Once we're done with this and I shut this down and get this loaded, I will also send you all out a copy of the entire playlist of all of these sessions, because we did record them all. So I'll send out the entire 6-session playlist, so that way they're available for you. As well as that, I'm also going to send you out the playlist for the on-site recruiter as well, just so you've got that for your reference. Those classes, I mean, I use the same template for them. Of course, my explanations for them are a little bit different. Some of it I went into a little bit more detail based on questions, or in some cases, as the case may be, lack of questions. So, and again, it's just there for your use. And then of course, for anyone who comes on board, we can point him to whichever deck you feel is the most appropriate for that person on your team. And then, and of course, I'm always available, and we'll do more of these in the future.
Great.
Awesome. Any questions? Sweet. Y'all are easy. Well, again, let me know if there's anything I can do for any of you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shauna.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have a good one.